We have the finale of Season 1 of The Last of Us, and while it was a short one, it was a big one. The culmination of the entire season ended off, I think, on a pretty high note, and it seems that 80% of you agree with me on that one. I've got a lot of thoughts on this episode and the season as a whole, but let's start with the episode. No point in keeping you waiting, let's get to it. We started off this episode with another cold open, and then the cold open actually continued, so I'm not sure if this is classified as a cold open, but we finally got to see Ellie's mother, the one and only Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie in the game. As someone who's played both games countless times, I could tell that this was Ashley Johnson right away before she ever said a word. With the amount of grunts and squawks that Ellie makes across both games, Ashley was immediately recognizable to me. While Ashley plays Ellie's mother, and that's fantastic, this scene actually answered a really important question that The Last of Us fans have had for years, and that's how Ellie is actually immune. Her mother was bit while Ellie either hadn't been born yet, or at least still had the umbilical cord, so however that happens, that somehow makes her immune. Probably a good thing that the Fireflies or anybody else doesn't know about that, because certainly all pregnant women would be purposefully infected and killed as they're giving birth. The whole opening scene gave me A Quiet Place vibes. The house, the pregnant woman, maybe that's it, I don't know. It just really reminded me of A Quiet Place. Some people say this was a wasted scene. I don't really think that at all. This literally told us how Ellie is immune, and we also got to see how Marlene knew Ellie and how important her mother was to her. And I think that's a very important scene when talking about Marlene's decision later on in the episode. But I'll get to that one in a little bit. But when we get to see Joel and Ellie again, we see how drastically different their relationship actually is. Their roles have essentially reversed. Joel is the talkative one trying to make jokes, and Ellie is the more reserved and quiet one. And while this certainly mirrors the game, I actually think it's done a bit better than the game did. In the game, Ellie is still pretty uppity and energetic, not as much as before, but it more so feels like the two are on even ground, and here Joel is certainly the more energetic of the two. This really shows how far the two of them have come in their own right. Ellie has become more hardened by the events she's faced and the conditions of the world, while Joel has become more lighthearted, almost numb to the world around him because he now has something worth fighting for. This is reinforced by a big change from the game when Joel tells Ellie that he's the person that missed the shot and that's how he got his scar. Joel lets Ellie in on this incredibly vulnerable secret, and I'm sure that he's never shared that with anybody else before, and he basically tells her that time didn't heal his wounds, she did. But at the end of the day, both Joel and Ellie are pretty closed off people, so before the L word gets thrown around, they continue about their day. One of the most iconic scenes from the game that was thankfully kept in is the giraffe scene. I was really worried about the scene not making it in the episode because as iconic as it is, this was probably a very difficult scene to shoot that required a lot of visual effects, and a lot of those kinds of scenes they've cut throughout this season, but the giraffe scene is one of, if not the most talked about and recognizable scenes from The Last of Us. It's literally the icon of the Last of Us discussion channel on my Discord, and this scene does so much for this episode. Ellie is already very closed off, and she only really goes back to her old self when she sees the giraffe, and this forces a pretty big smile out of Joel to see his new daughter back to her old cheery self, and this does a lot to reinforce Joel's decision later on in the episode. This is the Ellie that he's used to, this is the Ellie that he wants around, and this is how he wants to make her feel. He sees now that it's still possible, even after all she's been through, and this is brought up later in the episode when he sees the giraffe on the wall in the hospital. Speaking of the hospital scene, I was really blown away by how well done it was. We've seen countless times in this show that a lot of the encounters are either dumbed down or just cut entirely, but this scene really did justice to the game's version as well. There's at least a dozen people that Joel kills either in self-defense or just straight up mercilessly, and with the music and Pedro's performance, I think this might be the best scene of the entire season. I really didn't expect it to be as large scale as it was. I almost expected him to kill the two guards and then have it cut right to him arriving at the surgery, but it's really so important to see just how many people he goes through in order to get to Ellie, and this scene and the the episode in general got all these really big moments down to a T. He's getting shot at like every single corner, but he turns into this like John Wick person and nobody can even touch him. Pedro plays this scene so emotionlessly, like he's on autopilot and just going through the motions, and I really loved everything about this entire sequence. When he gets to the surgery room, he kills only one doctor, the main doctor. And in the game, it's really up to the player to kill the other doctors or not. I did find it a bit strange that Joel didn't kill the other ones too, but I guess you can chalk it up to the fact that he got what he wanted, so he stopped killing. Also, one of these doctors is played by Laura Bailey, who plays a very important character in the second game. There's also a very specific reason for only killing the single doctor. If you know, you know. If you don't, then you'll find out. Everything about the ending was just about frame for frame taken out of the game, even the intercut scene of Joel maybe having given back Ellie to Marlene, and I'm glad they kept that as well. A lot of people were saying that the runtime of the episode was an issue and it felt rushed, and I didn't feel that way at all. Was it shorter? Yeah, of course, but I didn't think the episode pacing was bad, and I think the scenes had enough of an impact for the amount of time they were given. Nothing about this entire season is going to be paced like the game was. You can stay at the giraffe scene for like 10 minutes or more if you want to in the game, so no, the show didn't have that, but I still think that what we had was enough. For all newbies to The Last of Us, let me know if you thought this episode seemed rushed or anything like that, because even as a game player, I didn't think that the episode was rushed, and I seem to be in the minority there. The actual ending scene was exactly what I wanted, and while some of the music cues weren't the greatest across the season, the music for the ending was probably the most important scene to score correctly, and they used the game's soundtrack for it, so if anything, the final scene left a very good taste in my mouth when it comes to the show overall. But I think the most important aspect of this episode is actually Marlene. The opening scene shows us exactly how close Marlene was with Ellie's mother, and her explanation to Joel about how hard this decision is for her is super important. Marlene believes wholeheartedly that the cure is gonna work, and there's no evidence to suggest otherwise that it wouldn't work. Joel finds these tape recordings in the game basically suggesting that a cure wouldn't work, but there's none of that in the show, meaning that Joel literally took away humanity's chance at a cure so that way he could be happy. I've said it once, and I'll say it 100 more times probably, but this story is only as good as it is because of its ending and Joel's choice. Having Joel sacrifice all of humanity for his own happiness is what makes this story so great. Not that Joel is a hero who saves his daughter from the evil Fireflies, but the exact opposite. For all you show-only people, this is what I've been wanting to ask you for the longest time, but what are your thoughts on Joel now? Do you understand his choice? Do you think of him as a hero, a villain, somewhere in between? Let me know that down in the comments below. Now that the season is over, am I done with the Last of Us videos? Absolutely not. I'm working on a full season review right now, as well as some other game-related videos, and when Season 2 rolls around, I'll be here for that, so if you're here for The Last of Us content, prepare to stay, because I've got a lot more coming. Let me know your thoughts on the episode and the season as a whole in the comments below, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more Last of Us content. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah.